I thought that I would do an extra video today because if there is one thing that I know about, it is trying to make a home that is very tiny look more spacious, hence more space saving ideas, particularly for small homes. So likely if you come from Sweden, Norway, England, a lot of the colder places in the world, and ones with quite difficult economies, often your home is quite tiny. Or you might live somewhere in a city such as New York, Japan, where also the real estate is limited to tiny little places because of the population. Either way, I believe that any of these space saving tips can come in handy for that, especially if you own a bit more than perhaps you need. And that is my number one tip right off the bat. We can always improve things by decluttering. So where in some instances throughout this video as we go around my home, whilst I demonstrate what I mean, I can tell you what I would do if I did have more. Although in general, I just decided to get rid of a whole load of stuff. Also guys, you may be wondering why I have my hair like this. And it is because I am having a bad hair day. And recently, for my recent trip, I did acquire a few more hair accessories, so I'm making the best use of them. I've got two little clips that sometimes when I'm having a bad hair day, this is what happens, at least until they flatten down anyway. So, one thing that I also mentioned before we get along with the space saving tips that I'm going to show you all is in the last video, which is only a few days ago, I mentioned that I'd had a little bit of a nightmare when we got back. Now, without going too much into detail with that, because I kind of want to save it for a video of its own, I don't want you to be all too much like wondering what's gone on, so I'll tell you a little bit more details. Basically, when my partner and I got back from holiday, sorry, I should say my mum and I, because my partners seem to have evaded it. On the last day of our holiday, we got the virus. You know what virus I'm talking about. We were very poorly. It's actually taken me a long time because now I've actually been back sort of just over 2 weeks and nearly 3 weeks actually. And I've only just started to feel a tiny bit better, but I'm not completely better. What we learned is, as much as I love these chairs, I didn't think about the fact of that when we are ill, I might actually want something that doesn't rock to sit on or lay on. Because what is lovely and great about the chairs is they are sort of rocking chairs, but they don't have a stabiliser. I love them, but I just didn't think about the what if for if you're sick, because obviously people with bigger homes do often have a spare room or a sofa where if one of you's sick and one of you isn't, you can sort of go to another place. Now, there was about 2 days when my partner got a tiny bit sick, Johnny, as I have introduced him to you all now. And on those 2 days, it was particularly awful because we were both sort of had fever, we were fidgeting, we couldn't get comfy because of the other person, and I'm not gonna lie, on that day, I really missed having a sofa. But because I fully want to think this through, I am having a bit longer to think about whether you got it, whether I reintroduce a sofa or not. It might mean that we have even more or even less, limited space, so even less space. But I just don't know if it is something that I'm really missing for the just in case of if one of you does get sick and you've got no other bed anywhere in the room. Anyway, I will save that for a whole other episode, but that is basically the crux of it. So at the moment, because of all that, I did move the chairs to the window, as you all saw in the last video. But now I have moved them back here. As somebody pointed out, we couldn't really watch TV, but when I was ill, because I didn't want to rock around, but I wanted to be able to watch TV, I moved one of the chairs out of the way and I literally went back to floor living on the floor because I just didn't want to rock around while I wasn't feeling well. So that's what we did there. Anyway, the other bit of news that I have for you all that kind of relates to this going round and giving you some space saving tips is we have just had the decorators in. It's all been painted except for the skirting board. However, There are a few paint crumbs where when they've tidied up, it's, I don't know, it's like broken off the seals of the paint can and stuff, and it literally only happened yesterday that they left. It's early in the morning now. So it isn't looking as tidy as it normally is what I'm saying, but I wanted to do this video for you all anyway. So let's start in the hallway, and we're going to go around, and I am going to give you some space-saving tips for a small home, because not only is this home incredibly small, 32 square metres, but I often say it's actually 22 square metres if you take out the entrance hall, the vestibule, the boiler cupboard area, the areas that are at the side of the chimney breast, the alcoves that we can't really use. It's really 22 square metres, and there are no built-in wardrobes or cupboards other than the kitchen cupboards, which are obviously for kitchen stuff. So let's go into the hallway. I'm going to put this cup down, but I still have quite a sore throat from the virus, so I'm doing my best. Right. These tips just are my word of what I normally do, but as you're about to see, it is a little bit not as tidy as normal, because we've just got back, we've been sick, and the decorators have just been. So, waiting in my hallway, I don't know if you can all see there, but we have our suitcases waiting to go back into their designated homes. I am also using my new camera, guys, so I have to get used to looking up, because now the viewfinder is in a different position. Our suitcases incurred some problems whilst we were travelling, so we're just deciding what to do with them, which is why they're in the hallway. They got a little bit damaged, but I think they might still be usable, I'm not sure. But either way, tip number one, if you do have a suitcase somewhere in your home, don't let that be wasted space. Use it as storage. That is what we do. Basically, my partner and I put all our stuff that is not being used on a regular basis inside our suitcase. Then at the point that we decide to obviously go off travelling, it can just come out. And because we're not going to be in our home, it doesn't really matter if it's just on our bed while we're away. It's sort of in a pile. And then when we come back and we unpack, we put all the other stuff back inside it. Tip number one. Tip number two, mirrors. Now, previously in our home, we did have actually a lot more mirrors than this, but we've downsized a bit. But we do have this very big mirror. What is great about having a floor standing mirror is that obviously when you have it leaning against the wall, there is a little bit of a gap behind it. We don't even waste that hidden space of storage, and we actually store anything we can behind it, whether it's flat packed boxes that we need to keep perhaps for the warranty. We actually currently, or we did have, we've just moved it, we had a bird cage behind it for when we rescue birds, but do not let that space be wasted. Also, whilst I'm here, I'll tell you all a little bit more about what's going on in this area, because it does look a little bit jumbly at the moment, and that is because of what has been going on. So I'll give you a little bit more information too. So I do actually have a bag of stuff waiting to be decluttered, but we're not in general doing that much anymore on this channel. I thought it was so few things, it didn't really warrant a video of its own. But basically this bag is waiting to go to the charity shop. I'll probably take that later today. It's a couple of things that we've just decided that we don't need. A couple of my partner's games that he's just decided he doesn't actually ever play. So they are going to charity. We do often leave a couple of our shoes out here because there is nowhere else to put them. And this little fella is actually going to go live in the bedroom, but I've just not reorganised that yet for all the reasons that I've stated. But that is my little tip for first things to consider. Also, this isn't really a space-saving tip, but a clutter tip. When you come in our doorway, you are greeted with just one little hook to put the key, and we have a tiny, minimal shelf. And that is to at least cut down on the amount of clutter that we leave out on any surfaces. We used to have a dresser at the end where the mirror is, and at one point it was even there. But we just decided that when it's there, you're tempted to put clutter on it. So if you remove that, object, then you're not as tempted. The only thing that still does bother me a little bit is these coats, but we simply have nowhere to put them. So they just live there. They're all my partner's coats. He has much more coats than me, but still not that many in the great scheme of things. It always just looks like more in a small home. Right, let's go to the next place. Let's get you all in place. Is this tip number 3? Possibly tip number 3. I have moved the mirror back because it was the room that dried first, so I'm now thinking about keeping the mirror in here. Tip number 3. If you do have a sofa, I think if you were really limited for storage, it is a really good way of still making your room look spacious and minimal, to utilise any space you can. So if you can push it back under the sofa or put it behind the sofa, it definitely helps. We actually had a fold-up glass table that was under the table for a year. Nobody ever knew it was there. It didn't get in our way, and it was just a great way of having it out of the way in a small space so that all this stuff doesn't feel like clutter. Because as you can see right now, what we're experiencing is we do have, if you can see, we have some blankets because it is starting to get colder. So we have them out because we use them nearly every night, but they are a little bit annoying. Now, previously when we had a sofa, it could just be stored behind it, no problem. But now we don't have the sofa, we kind of can't really do that. I mean, it could just go on the floor, but you would still be able to see it. Quick one as well. Some people, if you are new here, you may be thinking, why have you paid for decorators to paint it all white? Well, number one, we haven't paid for it because this is a rented property and the landlord felt it needed doing. But also, we actually like it being white because white actually makes the room look very, very bright in such a small home that actually, despite it having very, very large windows, this is a very tiny lane behind a hotel and various other apartment buildings, and it doesn't actually get that much light in winter. Case in point. And that is still with a light on through there. It is really not that bright most days. Next space-saving hack. That is not straight. They've not put it back on straight since they left the decorators, so I need to straighten it up. However, what I do like to do is I found that because I do make candles as one of my hobbies, I had lots of little tea lights and things as well hanging around sometimes, and because we don't have any drawers to put things in, we wanted a way of storing something that didn't look like clutter. So we did get 2 of those books that are empty that you can store things inside, and then it looks like decor, but it's actually something useful that stores things out of sight on a little floating bookshelf with our projector on top. I also think that a projector is a very good space-saving idea because look how tiny it is. You save all the space of a TV. You then don't really have to have a TV stand. I know some TVs can go on the wall now. In general, I just think it takes up a lot less space. So, the kitchen. This is a very tiny kitchen and it is often misconstrued on my videos. People think it's much bigger than it is. It is 2 meters by 2 meters. That is how tiny it is. So we have to, excuse my cup of tea I left out, as you saw. We have to absolutely make the best use of space. In this whole kitchen, in fact, in our whole property, we have 1 drawer. So the 1 drawer is our cutlery drawer. Everything that we need in the kitchen has to live in this drawer. So, excuse the fact it is messy, guys. We normally, when the painters and decorators have not been here, we leave out only these things. That is all we leave out, and that is literally just to free up a little bit. Do we need the light on? I think we do. That is literally just to free up a little bit more space in our cutlery drawer, because it is incredibly full otherwise without alleviating that little bit of space. So to avoid that, have something else out that doesn't lead to clutter. For instance, for a while I used to try a utensils pot on the side, but as you can see, I don't really like having anything on the side. So that is a way of having something out to alleviate space in your perhaps very small drawer or lack of drawers, but it's still not on your kitchen work surfaces. Also, I like to use things that are out to make it look nice, but at the same time that are space saving. For instance, let me get this out for you all. For instance, when the decorators were here, I moved everything off the sides. However, you may be able to see that the patch in here is still here, and that is because they didn't actually do the kitchen walls. So I moved everything and the kitchen walls didn't get done. So I am going to do the kitchen myself, but just for today's video, I will show you what I did do. I took this off of the shelf so it didn't get knocked off, but this is an example of things I like to do that actually are space saving, in terms of it also makes it look like less clutter, but also makes it look peaceful. So that is our fruit bowl. I still need to fill it up with some fruit, but we do actually normally keep fruit in there. And basically it really is space saving because it means it doesn't have to go in our cupboards, it doesn't have to go in our fridge, it's here out of the way, it's not on a surface. So I like to utilise having shelves rather than putting things on work surfaces as well. Also, this is another tip that I have learned in the past. We will go back in there in a second. But for many, many, many years, I was a lover of curtains. And then I just realised that visually, as cosy and comforting as they may be, and your home may even be able to get away with it if you've got a bigger home, but in a smaller home, the drapes, i.e. the curtains as we call them here, draping down to the floor, it may look opulent and cosy, but it actually steals a lot of space. So actually what is more space saving is blinds. I mean, I don't know if you can all see from there, but I personally think the room looks so much larger through not having these huge things hanging down to the floor over here. Now there is another thing that I was going to show you all in the kitchen, and that is, I'll have to do it down here on the floor. You truly cannot waste any space. I'll have to turn that off for now. Why is the light doing that? Stop it. There we go. You truly cannot afford to waste any space at all when you live in a small property. So we use this for our bin. We even have these magnetic spice jars. We even hang things like our dustpan down the back as a magnet on the side. You cannot waste any space. The same at the side of the washing machine. And then to also make it not cluttered, we installed this little Japandi style curtain to at least kind of hide it all, but normally this is what it would look like. We've got this little curtain, and down there we keep our cleaning stuff. We've even got a spare pan. Right at the back, our dustpan. And you cannot be choosy when you live in a small property. I once got a comment on one of these videos of somebody saying, that's not very hygienic, keeping that next to each other. It is tough when you live in a small property because there is simply nowhere else to keep it. So what we obviously do is each time we get the pan out to use it, we clean it before we use it because it's been next to other things that might not be perhaps appropriate, because you are limited to space. The key is to never ever waste any space, and to try and have furniture that is as multifunctional as possible, and really think about how you live your lifestyle so that not any bit of furniture is wasted. Have I got any tips I can tell you about the bedroom? Yes, I have. The biggest tip that we use in our house. So let's go through. What often quite shocks people about our bedroom is that it basically only has a bed and a desk in it. And that is because there is literally only a 3-foot gap around our whole bed. And if we started putting in wardrobes, even mirrored wardrobes, which to a degree would make the room look a bit bigger, we would just lose so much space. So the one thing that we decided was that we were going to have a bed that could have trolley drawers underneath, because it is basically like having a horizontal instead of a vertical wardrobe. And the great thing about underbed storage is it is hidden. It is hidden storage that doesn't take up any extra space in your room, because many of us have a bed anyway. And the only little sacrifice for us is that really I personally love having a low floor on the ground bed. And it meant I couldn't do that, but I accepted that in this property it was absolutely the best solution, so that we had all this extra space as a result of it. Otherwise we would have probably had to have 2 wardrobes up either side of our alcoves, the chimney breast in our room, because they're only about 70 centimetres. So yeah, we'd have definitely needed 1 each, and then the room would have looked even smaller. Because if anybody does actually know about feng shui and even spatial design, the higher you put things in your room, that even adds to a lack of feeling of space in a room, which is why I try to keep all my furniture as low as possible as well. So I've never liked the idea of having any wardrobes in the bedroom, or even high shelving units in the living room, and even in the hallway. You know, it would just engulf and dwarf our space even more. So those are my space saving tips. I hope you've all enjoyed this little extra video this week, and maybe it's given you all a taster of some of the things to come. I do want to clarify for anybody that was a bit worried after the last video, I'm not moving away from minimalism. I'm just incorporating a little bit more to do with organisation, home design, and also still doing the minimalist living type videos. I am not moving away from minimalism. That is definitely not what I said. We're just incorporating more because, as I've said, I just simply don't have anything left to declutter anymore, and therefore we can't do as much of the decluttering content. And that's why I may even help others declutter, because I can't get that content from my own home anymore. So really it has to be about minimalism, minimalist lifestyle, home organisation, because even now, even though I don't have much, I still do attempt to organise what I do have differently sometimes. And that comes from the fact, you know, it derives from the fact that I am interested in home interior design, and therefore I'm sometimes reorganise what I decide to do, and therefore organise my belongings, because I'm also changing something within the home. That's also a part of my hobby. So just to be clear, it's still minimalist and simple living. If you look at the top of my channel page on Sage Life Minimalism, it has always said minimalism, simple living and eco-friendly zero waste living. That has always been there. So we're just focusing a little bit more on the other stuff as well sometimes now, because the decluttering part of minimalism, I've not got as much content to do on that anymore. So hope you all enjoyed this extra video. I'll see you on Thursday, which is my regular time for uploads, 7 p.m. our time. Bye.